nothing special is happening. This sentence sounds almost offensive to the mind, as if something important has been dismissed, as if meaning has been taken away, because the mind has been trained to look for peaks, for moments that stand out, for experiences that can be remembered, marked, repeated. From early on, life is framed as a sequence of significant events, moments that matter, moments that define, moments that separate before from after. Even suffering is given meaning this way. Even joy is evaluated by its intensity. Even peace is measured by how different it feels from restlessness. Quietly, without being noticed, the ordinary is devalued. Too common, too repetitive, too uneventful to be trusted. And yet the ordinary never stopped carrying life. Breathing never paused. Sensation never withdrew. Awareness never waited for permission. Life continued with complete indifference to your expectations. The problem was never that nothing special was happening. The problem was the belief that something else should be. The mind is not satisfied with what is. It wants emphasis, contrast, highlight. Something to point at and say, this is it, this matters, this means something. But notice how quickly the highlight fades, how fast the peak becomes memory, how immediately attention begins to search for the next moment. This searching is not curiosity, it is dependency. The dependency on significance. When significance is absent, the mind feels lost, ungrounded, unemployed, because without significance, identity has nothing to attach to. Nothing special is happening does not mean nothing is alive. It means nothing is being elevated above the rest. No moment is placed on a pedestal. No experience is crowned as more important than another. This equality is deeply threatening to identity, because identity survives through hierarchy, higher and lower, deeper and shallower, more awake and less awake. When hierarchy collapses, identity loses orientation, and orientation feels like safety. Most people believe they want peace. What they actually want is meaningful disturbance. Something that confirms they are moving, progressing, becoming. Stillness without progress feels pointless. Silence without insight feels empty. Ordinariness without meaning feels like failure. So attention looks away, toward memory, toward anticipation, toward comparison. Anything but this. Before evaluation existed, experience simply happened. Sound appeared, sensation appeared, movement occurred. No commentary, no judgment, no search for importance. Life did not need to justify itself. It was only later that meaning was demanded. Later that experience was required to explain itself. Later that the ordinary became insufficient. Notice how often experience is scanned. Is this deep enough? Is this it? Is something supposed to happen now? This scanning is not neutral, it is vigilant. The vigilance of identity, checking whether it is progressing, whether it is on the right path, whether it is getting closer to something promised. When nothing special is happening, identity panics quietly, because it cannot measure itself. And what cannot be measured feels like disappearance. But look more closely. Before you learn to measure experience, experience was already here. Before you learn to judge it, it was already alive. Before you learn to compare it, it was already complete. Nothing was missing then. The sense of lack came later with interpretation, with story, with expectation. The demand for something special is learned, conditioned, reinforced. It comes from watching others describe moments of intensity and assuming that intensity equals truth. But intensity is stimulation, not clarity. Intensity excites the nervous system, truth calms it. Truth is quiet, so quiet that it is often mistaken for absence. There is a moment that happens naturally, though it is often overlooked. Effort relaxes, not because you succeeded, not because you arrived, but because the system is tired of striving. In that moment, nothing opens, no door, no vision, no revelation, just this. And because it feels ordinary, it is dismissed. Too small, too familiar, too unspectacular. Attention moves on, and the habit continues. Nothing special is happening is not a conclusion, it is an invitation. An invitation to stop overlooking, to stop waiting for life to announce itself, to stop assuming that meaning must arrive as an event. Life does not announce, it presents. And it has always been doing so. Look at how much energy is spent preparing to be present, preparing to understand, preparing to be ready. Preparation implies delay, it implies that this moment is not enough yet. But presence cannot be prepared for, it is either noticed or postponed, and postponement feels responsible, reasonable, safe, until years pass. Until years pass, when nothing special is happening, there is no pressure to capture the moment, no urgency to remember it, no need to turn it into a story. This is deeply relieving. You no longer need to curate experience. You no longer need to justify your life to yourself. Life is allowed to be lived without documentation. The ordinary is not opposed to the sacred. The ordinary is what remains when the idea of the sacred dissolves. When nothing is set apart, when nothing is elevated, when nothing is excluded. This inclusion is not dramatic, it is intimate. And because it is intimate, it is easily missed. Notice how often attention looks away from what is already happening, toward what could be happening instead. This movement is automatic, habitual, conditioned, but it can be seen. And when it is seen, it does not need to be stopped, it simply loses authority. Nothing special is happening is not resignation, it is honesty. It says nothing needs to perform, nothing needs to prove meaning, nothing needs to be improved before it is allowed. This moment does not need endorsement. The mind will object, it will say, but surely something matters. Yes, everything matters when nothing is singled out. Meaning does not arise from emphasis, it arises from intimacy. And intimacy does not require events, only contact. Contact with sensation, contact with sound, contact with breath, without asking where it leads, without measuring depth, without hoping it becomes something else. Here patience appears naturally. Not patience as waiting, patience as the absence of hurry. When nothing special is happening, there is no reason to rush, no reason to arrive, no reason to escape. Many people fear this. They call it boredom. But boredom is not the absence of stimulation. It is the absence of interest in what is already here. Interest returns when expectation relaxes. The The moment does not need to change for life to be alive. It needs attention without demand. Pause here, not to do something, not to deepen anything. Simply notice what is already happening without commentary. That is enough.
The habit of looking for something special is subtle. It does not always feel like seeking often. It feels like discernment. You tell yourself you are simply being attentive, that you are not settling, that you are looking for truth, depth, clarity. But look carefully. This looking is rarely open. It is selective. It filters experience through expectation. It compares what is happening now to what you imagine could happen instead. And comparison always implies distance. When experience is compared to an imagined ideal, the present moment is already diminished. It does not stand on its own. It must compete. This competition creates tension, a quiet dissatisfaction, a sense that something essential is just out of reach. And because this tension feels familiar, it is rarely questioned. The mind has learned to associate meaning with difference. If this moment feels different from the last, it must be important. If it feels stronger, clearer, more intense, it must be closer to truth. But difference is not depth. Difference is variation. Depth is intimacy. And intimacy does not require change. Nothing special is happening means this moment does not need to outperform another. It does not need to be better than yesterday, or deeper than the last insight, or more meaningful than the previous experience. This moment is not in competition, and without competition, a great deal of pressure dissolves. Notice how often attention asks, "How is this going?" This question seems harmless, responsible, aware, but it assumes a process that must be evaluated. It assumes a self moving through time, collecting experiences, progressing towards something. This assumption is rarely examined. When nothing special is happening, there is nothing to evaluate. No metric, no progress bar, no inner scoreboard. This can feel disorienting. Because evaluation provided orientation, it gave the sense of moving forward. Without it, time loosens, and loosened time feels unsafe to the mind. The mind equates movement with survival. Stillness feels like risk, like stagnation, like failure. But this is learned. Stillness is not absence of life. It is absence of interference. Life does not stop in stillness, it clarifies. The ordinary moment is often avoided because it does not feed identity. It does not say, "You are growing, you are awakening, you are becoming someone important." It simply happens, and because it offers no validation, it is overlooked. Yet validation is not nourishment, validation is reinforcement. It strengthens an image, it does not satisfy the system. This is why no amount of validation ever feels enough. Nothing special is happening is an invitation to stop feeding the image, not by rejecting it, not by fighting it, by not requiring it. Look at how many spiritual conversations are actually negotiations of identity. Who has seen more, who understands better, who is further along. Even humility can become a posture, even not knowing can become an identity. This is not a mistake, it is conditioning. Identity adapts, it survives. When nothing special is happening, identity has no role. It cannot display itself, it cannot compare, it cannot claim territory. This feels like loss, but what is actually lost is only the habit of self-reference. Without self-reference, experience becomes simple, not dull, simple. Sound is sound, sensation is sensation, thought is thought, no extra layer is added, and without the extra layer there is less friction. Friction is what makes experience feel heavy, the heaviness of constantly relating everything back to a self. How am I doing? What does this mean about me? Where am I in this? When these questions quiet, experience lightens. Nothing special is happening does not mean nothing matters. It means nothing needs to be emphasized in order to matter. This is difficult for the mind to accept because the mind equates importance with focus. But focus is narrow, life is wide. Attention that is relaxed is different from attention that is concentrated. Concentration excludes, relaxed attention includes. When nothing special is happening, attention widens naturally. It does not lock onto an object, it rests in the field. This resting is not passive, it is receptive. Receptivity allows subtlety. Subtlety is lost when attention hunts for impact. Many people miss the depth of their own lives because they are waiting for impact, for something to hit them, move them, change them. But life rarely hits, it whispers. Nothing special is happening is an invitation to listen differently. Not for messages, not for guidance, not for answers, but for contact with what is already here. Contact does not require interpretation. In fact, interpretation often interrupts contact.
The moment something is interpreted, attention leaves the raw experience and moves into meaning making. Meaning making feels productive, but it creates distance. Notice how quickly the mind explains. This is good, this is bad, this is progress, this is resistance. Explanation creates closure, but closure is premature. Life is not asking to be closed, it is asking to be met. When nothing special is happening, there is no urgency to conclude, no need to understand, no need to resolve. This open-endedness can feel uncomfortable, but discomfort is not danger. It is unfamiliarity. Most people are unfamiliar with unstructured presence. Presence without goal, without interpretation, without direction, because so much of life has been lived as preparation. Preparation for success, preparation for healing, preparation for awakening. Always preparing, rarely arriving. Nothing special is happening is the end of preparation. Not the end of life, not the end of learning, the end of rehearsal. Rehearsal implies a future performance, a moment when everything will finally count. But life is not a performance, it does not culminate. It unfolds, and unfolding does not require readiness. The belief that you must be ready before you can be present is one of the most persistent illusions. Presence does not improve with readiness, it is immediate, either noticed or ignored. When When nothing special is happening, there is no excuse to postpone, no reason to wait, no justification to delay contact. This can feel exposing because postponement provided protection. Protection from feeling, from uncertainty, from simplicity. Simplicity is not always comforting, it removes complexity, and with it, distraction. Without distraction, what remains must be faced. Not as a problem, as a fact. The fact of being here without adornment, without explanation. This is not a spiritual achievement, it is the most ordinary condition, and because it is ordinary, it is often overlooked. Nothing special is happening does not point away from life, it points directly into it. Without filters, without commentary, without expectations. If resistance arises here, do not correct it. Resistance is part of experience. Feel it. Notice it. Do not turn it into a lesson. Let it be what it is. Experience does not need to be purified in order to be real. Confusion does not need to resolve in order to be allowed. Clarity does not need to arrive in order for life to continue. Nothing special is happening means life is no longer auditioning. It does not need to impress you, and you do not need to approve it. This mutual release creates ease. Ease is not excitement, it is absence of struggle. And absence of struggle reveals a quiet aliveness that was always present. Pause here. Not to extract meaning, not to hold on to anything. Simply let this moment be exactly as it is. Unremarkable, undramatic, complete. At some point, the insistence on meaning begins to soften. Not because meaning was found, but because the demand for it becomes tiring. You realize how much effort has been spent trying to make life say something specific, trying to extract a message, trying to ensure that nothing is wasted. This effort often hides behind noble intentions, growth, healing, understanding. But beneath it, there is tension. The tension of needing life to justify itself. Nothing special is happening is not an attack on meaning. It is the end of coercion. Life is no longer required to explain why it exists or why you are here or what should come next. This relaxation does not feel dramatic, it feels quiet, almost anticlimactic, which is why it is often dismissed. The mind expects revelation to arrive with force, with clarity that cuts through doubt, with certainty that cannot be shaken. But certainty is not truth, certainty is closure, and closure is often premature. Truth does not rush to conclude, it remains open. When nothing special is happening, there is no final answer to reach. This can feel unsettling, because questions once provided movement, they gave direction, they gave purpose. Without them, life feels exposed, unscripted. But unscripted does not mean empty. It means alive without rehearsal. You are no longer acting out a narrative, no longer preparing for a conclusion. You are simply here meeting what arises, without knowing what it leads to. This lack of destination is often misunderstood as nihilism.
But nihilism rejects meaning. What happens here is different. Meaning is not rejected. It is no longer forced. Meaning is allowed to arise naturally when it arises and dissolve when it dissolves. When nothing special is happening, experience is no longer filtered through usefulness. You no longer ask, what is this for? What will this lead to? You begin to notice how often usefulness was used to avoid contact. Contact with uncertainty, contact with vulnerability, contact with not knowing. These were once seen as problems. Now they are simply conditions. The need to be special is deeply rooted. It is tied to survival, to recognition, to belonging. From early on, being special meant being seen. So ordinariness felt like disappearance. But ordinariness is not invisibility, it is intimacy without performance. When nothing special is happening, you are no longer required to stand out. You are allowed to blend back into the flow of life. This can feel like loss, but what is lost is only the burden of being exceptional. The body often relaxes here before the mind understands. Breathing deepens, tension softens, movements become less guarded. The nervous system recognizes safety before thought explains it. You may notice that you stop trying to hold on to moments, no longer trying to preserve a feeling, no longer trying to repeat an experience. This is not indifference. It is trust. Trust that life does not need to be managed to continue. Memory loses its grip, not because it disappears, but because it no longer defines now. The past becomes reference, not residence, and the future becomes possibility, not obligation. When nothing special is happening, time feels different. Not slower, not faster, less heavy. Time is no longer something you are moving through. It is simply the rhythm of change appearing and disappearing. Urgency fades, not because nothing matters, but because nothing is missing. Urgency always implies lack. When lack is questioned, urgency relaxes. This relaxation is subtle. It does not announce itself, it does not declare completion. It simply becomes noticeable that you are no longer rushing toward an imagined resolution. The desire to arrive was always fueled by discomfort. Discomfort with ambiguity, discomfort with uncertainty, discomfort with not being defined. When these discomforts are allowed without being solved, arrival loses meaning. Nothing special is happening. Is not a state you enter. It is the absence of a demand. The demand that life must culminate in something more before it is acceptable. You may notice that language becomes simpler, less symbolic, less metaphorical. Words are no longer required to carry weight. Silence feels sufficient. This does not mean expression ends. It becomes more precise. You say what needs to be said without embellishment. You act when action is needed, without justification. Relationship changes here, not dramatically, subtly. You stop using others as mirrors to confirm your progress. You stop comparing experiences. You stop measuring depth. Connection becomes simpler, more human. When nothing special is happening, you are less interesting to the mind and more present to life. This trade-off is not always welcomed at first, but it is honest.